December 6th, 325 AD, the city of Nicaea, in what is now modern Turkey. 300 bishops have gathered from across the Roman Empire for the most important religious council in Christian history. Emperor Constantine himself has summoned them. The fate of Christianity hangs in the balance. A theological dispute threatens to tear the young faith apart before it can truly begin. The debate has grown heated. A priest named Arius is speaking, arguing that Jesus Christ was a created being, divine, yes, but not co-eternal with God the Father. Not truly God in the same way. The words are technical, philosophical, the kind of argument that would make most modern listeners' eyes glaze over. But to the men in this room, this is not an abstract debate. This is everything. If Arius is right, the entire foundation of Christian worship is wrong. If Christ is not fully God, then Christianity has been worshipping a creature rather than the Creator. The stakes could not be higher. And then it happens. A bishop rises from his seat. He is not a young man, perhaps in his 50s, weathered by years of persecution and imprisonment. His name is Nicholas, and he comes from the coastal city of Myra. He has heard enough. He strides across the council chamber, and in front of the Emperor of Rome, in front of the assembled leadership of the Christian Church, he strikes Arius across the face. The room erupts. This is not done. Violence at a church council, striking a fellow cleric. Nicholas is immediately seized, stripped of his bishop's vestments, thrown into a cell to await judgment. He has disgraced himself. His career is over. That night, according to legend, Nicholas has a vision. Christ and the Virgin Mary appear in his cell. They ask why he is imprisoned. "For loving you," Nicholas replies, and they restore to him his vestments and his gospel book. When the guards check his cell the next morning, they find him fully robed, reading scripture, his chains inexplicably loosened. The council, shaken by this apparent miracle, reinstates him. This is the man who became Santa Claus, the jolly old elf in the red suit, the gift giver who slides down chimneys, the embodiment of commercial Christmas, whose image sells billions of dollars of merchandise every year. That Santa Claus was, according to tradition, a man who punched a heretic in the face at a church council and was saved from disgrace only by divine intervention. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you something. If you believe these dark chapters of history deserve to be remembered, if you believe the truth about our saints and our celebrations should not be buried beneath comfortable myth, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing. Your support keeps the candle lit and allows us to keep exploring the shadows. Tonight, we descend into the 4th century, to a world where bishops performed miracles and suffered martyrdom, where the line between saint and sinner was drawn in blood and flame. We will meet the real Nicholas of Myra, a man born into wealth who gave it all away, a prisoner who survived persecution, a bishop who wielded both divine power and human violence. We will witness the legends that grew around him. Children saved from a butcher's barrel, prostitutes rescued from their fate, storms calmed, and sailors saved. We will trace how a 4th century Turkish bishop became a Dutch gift giver, then an American icon, then a global brand. We will meet his dark companions, the demons and monsters who traveled with him through the centuries, punishing the wicked while he rewarded the good. Krampus, Black Peter, Père Fouettard, the shadows that Christmas forgot. And we will ask the questions that the Christmas cards never raise. What does it mean that our symbol of generosity was also a symbol of violence? What have we lost in sanitizing our saints? And what lurks in the shadows of the holidays we think we know? This is not a story about Santa Claus. Santa Claus is a fiction, a commercial creation designed to sell products and warm hearts. This is a story about the man behind the myth and the darkness that myth was designed to hide. This is Saint Nicholas, and his story is stranger than you know. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. To understand Nicholas, we must first understand the world into which he was born, and that world was one of persecution, suffering, and blood. Nicholas was born around 270 AD in the city of Patara, in the Roman province of Lycia, what is now the southern coast of Turkey. This was a prosperous region, a crossroads of trade routes connecting east and west. Greek culture had flourished here for centuries. The city was wealthy, cosmopolitan, home to merchants and sailors and scholars. It was also a dangerous time to be a Christian. The Roman Empire had been persecuting followers of the new faith on and off for over 2 centuries. But the persecutions of Nicholas's youth would be the worst in Christian history. Emperor Diocletian, who came to power in 284 AD, launched what became known as the Great Persecution, a systematic attempt to destroy Christianity entirely. Churches were demolished, sacred texts were burned, Christians were given a choice: sacrifice to the Roman gods or die. Those who refused faced execution by sword, by fire, by wild beasts in the arena. Others were sent to the mines, a death sentence in slow motion, as they were worked until their bodies gave out. Women were sent to brothels, men were mutilated, families were torn apart. This was the world that shaped Nicholas. He was not born into some peaceful Christian utopia where faith was easy and comfortable. He was born into a world where believing in Christ could get you killed, where bishops were martyred, where the simple act of gathering for worship could bring soldiers to your door. The historical records are sparse, as they are for most figures from this period, but tradition tells us that Nicholas was imprisoned during the Diocletian persecution. He survived, but he bore the scars of what he had witnessed. When he later struck Arius at the Council of Nicaea, he was not acting as some peaceful saint momentarily overcome by passion. He was acting as a man who had watched his brothers and sisters in faith tortured and killed for their beliefs. A man for whom heresy was not an abstract theological error, but a direct assault on the faith people had died for. This is the Nicholas the Christmas cards don't show, not a jolly grandfather figure. A survivor, a fighter, a man forged in the fires of persecution, who would not stand silent while someone threatened to undo everything the martyrs had died for. Nicholas's parents were wealthy Christians, devout and generous by all accounts. They raised their son in the faith, teaching him the virtues of charity and compassion. But they did not live to see him grow old. A plague swept through the region when Nicholas was still young. Both his parents died, leaving him an orphan. but an orphan with a substantial inheritance. He was rich, young, and alone. He could have done anything with that money. He could have lived a life of comfort and ease, insulated from the suffering around him by walls of gold. He gave it all away. The most famous story of Nicholas's generosity, the one that would eventually transform him into the gift-giving figure we know today, concerns three sisters in his hometown of Patara. Their father had once been a wealthy man, but he had fallen on hard times. Now he was destitute, unable to provide dowries for his daughters. And in the ancient world, a woman without a dowry faced a grim future. No respectable man would marry her. She would become a burden on her family, a source of shame. And for families desperate enough, there was always another option, one that no father wanted to contemplate. The father, in his despair, was preparing to sell his daughters into prostitution. It was that, or watch them starve. Nicholas heard about the family's plight, but he did not want to give his charity openly, perhaps out of humility, perhaps to spare the father's pride. So one night, he crept to the family's house and threw a bag of gold through an open window. It was enough for the eldest daughter's dowry. She was married and saved from her fate. He returned a second night. Another bag of gold. The second daughter was saved. By the third night, the father was waiting. He had guessed that his mysterious benefactor would return. When Nicholas approached with the third bag of gold, the father caught him, fell at his feet in gratitude, and tried to thank him. Nicholas made the man promise to tell no one. He wanted no credit for his generosity. He wanted only to serve God. This story is the origin of gift-giving traditions associated with Saint Nicholas. The bags of gold, in some versions, landed in stockings hung by the fire to dry. Hence the tradition of Christmas stockings. The secret nighttime delivery became the model for Santa's annual visits. The rescue of children from a terrible fate became the template for all the good Nicholas would do. But we should not sanitize this story. The father was about to sell his daughters into sexual slavery. They would have been raped repeatedly by strangers until their youth faded and they were discarded. This is what Nicholas prevented, not a minor inconvenience, not a bit of hardship, a lifetime of violation and degradation. Nicholas's generosity was not soft or sentimental. It was fierce. It was urgent. It was aimed at the darkest corners of human suffering, at the places where innocence is destroyed and hope dies. He did not give presents to children who had been nice all year. He saved girls from being sold as sex slaves. This is the real St. Nicholas, and this is what we have forgotten. Nicholas became Bishop of Myra, a port city on the Mediterranean coast. He was known for his piety, his generosity, and increasingly for his miracles. Sailors prayed to him when storms threatened their ships, and calm waters would follow. Prisoners facing execution would cry out his name, and witnesses reported seeing Nicholas appear in distant cities to intervene on their behalf. The sick were healed. The dying were restored. The impossible became routine in his presence. Whether we believe these stories literally or understand them as the hagiographic exaggerations common to ancient saints' lives, they tell us something important about how Nicholas was perceived. He was not seen as a comfortable, friendly figure. He was seen as a man of power, divine power, channeled through mortal flesh. He commanded storms. He defied emperors. He could be in two places at once. This is not Santa Claus. This is something closer to a superhero or a god. But one legend stands out above all others. one story that reveals the darkness at the heart of the Nicholas tradition, a darkness that has been almost completely erased from modern memory. It is the story of the 3 children and the butcher's barrel. The story exists in many versions, but they all share the same horrifying core. 3 young boys, sometimes described as students, sometimes as young clerks, sometimes simply as children, were traveling through the countryside. Night fell before they could reach their destination, and they stopped at an inn to seek shelter. The innkeeper welcomed them warmly, offered them food and drink, showed them to their room. That night, while they slept, he murdered them. In some versions, he slit their throats. In others, he hacked them to pieces with an axe. The details vary, but the horror is consistent. 3 innocent children, trusting in the hospitality of a stranger, killed in their beds. But the innkeeper was not merely a murderer, he was also a butcher. And he had a practical use for the bodies. He dismembered the children. He packed their flesh into a large barrel, salted like pork. And he planned to sell them as meat to unsuspecting travelers. This is a story we tell about Santa Claus. This is part of the St. Nicholas tradition, one of the most famous legends associated with him for over 1,000 years. Children pickled in a barrel, human flesh sold as food, cannibalism as commerce. Where did this nightmare come from? 7 years passed. The butcher innkeeper continued his gruesome trade. More travelers came and went. Some perhaps never left. The barrel in the cellar was topped up with fresh meat whenever supplies ran low. And then St. Nicholas arrived. The bishop was traveling through the region, and he too stopped at the inn for the night. The innkeeper, not recognizing his guest, offered him the usual hospitality, including a meal. Nicholas looked at the meat set before him, and he knew. Divine insight, holy vision, the power that allowed him to calm storms and save prisoners across impossible distances, now revealed to him the true nature of the flesh on his plate. He knew what it was. He knew where it came from. He knew what lay in the barrel in the cellar. He rose from the table. He descended to the cellar. He found the barrel still packed with the salted remains of children, and he performed his greatest miracle. He made the sign of the cross. He prayed, and the children rose from the barrel, whole, alive, restored from dismemberment and death, as if waking from sleep. 7 years dead, pickled in salt, sold as meat. And yet they stood before him, rubbing their eyes, complaining that their nap had been too short. "We slept so well," they said. The butcher innkeeper, confronted with his crime made manifest, confessed everything. In some versions of the story, Nicholas forgives him and he repents. In others, divine justice falls upon him. The details vary. The resurrection is constant. This story was enormously popular throughout medieval Europe. It was depicted in countless paintings, carved into church facades, illustrated in prayer books. The image of Nicholas standing over a barrel with 3 children emerging from it became one of the most recognizable icons of the saint, as common in its time as images of Santa and his reindeer are today. And yet almost no one today has heard of it. Why would Christians create and cherish such a gruesome story about their beloved saint? The answer lies in the medieval understanding of holiness and of childhood. In the medieval world, death was everywhere. Child mortality was staggeringly high. Plague swept through villages and cities without warning. War was constant. Famine was common. Parents buried their children with terrible regularity. The small graves accumulated year after year, generation after generation. The story of the 3 children in the barrel spoke to that reality. It acknowledged the worst thing that could happen, the nightmare scenario, the absolute horror. Children killed, their bodies desecrated, their humanity erased. If there was a rock bottom of human experience, this was it. And then it offered hope, even from that, especially from that. If Nicholas could restore children from 7 years of death and dismemberment, then no loss was truly final. If God's power could reach into a butcher's barrel and pull back life, then it could reach into any grave. The story was not about horror for horror's sake. It was about the absolute power of divine love to overcome even absolute evil. For parents who had buried children, and in medieval Europe that was most parents, the story offered something precious. The belief that their children were not truly lost, that the God who worked through Nicholas could work the same miracle for them, that death was not the end, the horror was the point. The deeper the darkness, the brighter the light that shone through it. But there is another element to this story, one that speaks to anxieties that have never entirely disappeared. The butcher innkeeper is a figure of trust who violates that trust absolutely. He offers hospitality, one of the most sacred obligations in the ancient world, and then commits the ultimate betrayal. He transforms children into commodities, human beings into meat. He represents every fear a parent has ever had about sending their child into a world full of strangers. And Nicholas defeats him. The saint who protects children, who guards the innocent, who sees through disguises and deceptions. He exposes the monster and undoes his work. He is the answer to the nightmare. This is what we have lost in sanitizing St. Nicholas into Santa Claus. The old stories acknowledged the darkness. They looked at the worst the world could offer: child murder, cannibalism, betrayal of the innocent. And they said, even so, there is a power greater than evil. Even so, there is hope. Santa Claus knows who's naughty or nice. Nicholas of Myra raised children from a butcher's barrel. The difference is the difference between a greeting card and a gospel. For most of his history, St. Nicholas did not travel alone. The jolly, solitary Santa Claus is a modern invention, and a particularly American one. For centuries, in countries across Europe, Nicholas was accompanied by a dark figure, a punisher, a demon, sometimes multiple demons. While Nicholas rewarded the good children with gifts and treats, his companion dealt with the wicked ones. These figures were not subtle. They were not metaphorical. They were terrifying by design, monstrous creatures meant to frighten children into obedience. They carried chains and birch switches. They threatened to beat naughty children, to stuff them in sacks, to carry them away to hell or to their lairs to be eaten. The most famous of these companions is Krampus. Krampus comes from the Alpine regions of Austria, Bavaria, and northern Italy. His name derives from the German word Krampen, meaning claw. He appears as a beast, half goat, half demon, with shaggy fur, cloven hooves, and a long, lolling tongue. He carries chains, said to symbolize the binding of the devil by the Christian church. He wields a bundle of birch branches for beating misbehaving children, and on his back he carries a basket or a sack for carrying away the truly wicked. On the night of December 5th, the eve of St. Nicholas Day, Krampus roams the streets. He accompanies St. Nicholas on his rounds. While Nicholas rewards good children with oranges and chocolate, Krampus rattles his chains and menaces the bad ones. In traditional celebrations, young men dress as Krampus and run through villages, chasing and swatting people with their birch bundles. It is loud, chaotic, deliberately frightening. This is Christmas as it was celebrated for centuries. Not a season of universal good cheer, but a time of judgment. A night when a saint and a demon walk together, sorting children into categories of blessed and damned. Krampus is only the most famous of Nicholas's dark companions. Across Europe, different regions develop their own versions of the punishing figure. In France, there is Père Fouettard, Father Whipper. He carries a whip or a bundle of sticks, and his job is to beat naughty children while St. Nicholas distributes gifts. Some versions of his legend connect him directly to the butcher from the barrel story. He is the murderer himself, condemned to serve Nicholas for eternity as penance for his crimes. The man who killed and pickled children must now help the saint who saved them. In the Netherlands and Belgium, there is Zwarte Piet, Black Peter. His origins are complex and contested. Some trace him to Moorish servants in medieval Spain. Others connect him to earlier demonic traditions. In traditional depictions, he appears in Renaissance clothing with blackened face and colorful costume. He carries a sack for bad children and a birch rod for punishment. Modern controversies about the racial implications of his appearance have led to ongoing debates and gradual changes to the tradition. In Germany, there is Knecht Ruprecht, Servant Rupert. He dresses in straw or animal skins. He asks children if they can pray, those who can receive gifts, and those who cannot receive beatings from his stick or bag of ashes. Some versions have him eating the truly wicked children. In Luxembourg, there is Hausaker, a hairy, monstrous figure who accompanies St. Nicholas. In Switzerland, Schmutzli. In the Czech Republic, a devil and an angel walk with Nicholas as a team. The pattern repeats across the continent. Wherever Nicholas went, darkness followed. This was not an accident or an aberration. It was the point. To modern sensibilities, the idea of terrifying children with demons at Christmas seems cruel and bizarre. Why would anyone think this was a good idea? The answer lies in the medieval understanding of morality and of childhood itself. In the pre-modern world, children were not seen as innocent beings who needed protection from harsh realities. They were seen as wild creatures who needed taming. The concept of childhood innocence is largely a modern invention. Earlier societies viewed children as savage, willful, prone to sin, miniature adults who lacked the wisdom and self-control of their elders. The role of parents and society was to discipline this wildness out of them, to make them good, to save them from their own natures. And fear was considered a legitimate tool in this project. The dark companions of St. Nicholas served this purpose. They made abstract moral lessons concrete. They transformed the vague threat of be good or else into something vivid and memorable. A child who had been chased by Krampus, who had felt the sting of a birch rod, who had heard the rattle of chains in the dark. That child would remember. That child would think twice before disobeying. Moreover, the pairing of saint and demon taught a fundamental Christian lesson. The universe is a battleground between good and evil, and every human soul is the prize. the reward of heaven and the punishment of hell are both real. Your choices matter. Your behavior has consequences, cosmic consequences, eternal consequences. Nicholas alone would have been incomplete. Without the threat of punishment, the promise of reward loses its meaning. Without shadow, there is no appreciation of light. The saint and the demon were two sides of the same coin. Judgment rendered visible, walking together through the winter streets. This is what we have lost. Not just the demons themselves, though those have been erased from mainstream celebration, but the entire framework they represented. The idea that Christmas is a time of moral reckoning. That behavior matters. That the universe is watching and recording and will respond accordingly. Santa Claus, in his modern form, threatens only coal, and even that is treated as a joke. No child actually fears Santa's judgment. No one really believes that bad behavior will have consequences. The old traditions believed otherwise, and they built their celebrations accordingly. Where did the demons come from? The Christian Church has always had a complicated relationship with the pagan traditions that preceded it. When Christianity spread through Europe, it did not simply erase what came before. It absorbed, it adapted, it reinterpreted. The winter solstice, the longest night of the year, had been a time of celebration and dread for millennia before Christ was born. It was a liminal time, when the boundary between the living and the dead grew thin. Spirits walked. The wild hunt rode through the skies. Supernatural beings, benevolent and malevolent, emerged from the darkness. The Church could not simply abolish these beliefs. They were too deeply rooted. So instead, it Christianized them. The fearsome spirits of the solstice became demons, real but subordinate to divine power. The gift-giving traditions of Saturnalia were attached to Christian saints. The whole complex of winter festivals was gradually reshaped around Christian narrative. Krampus bears the marks of this process. His goat-like appearance echoes the horned gods of pre-Christian Europe. Pan, Chernunos, the woodland spirits that pagan cultures had honored for centuries. His chains symbolize his subjugation by the Church. He is a pagan deity demoted to demon, forced to serve a Christian saint. The other dark companions have similar origins. They are the old gods in new disguises, the spirits of the woods and the wild, of winter and death, transformed into servants of the Christian order. They retain their terror, that was too useful to discard, but they have been subordinated to a new master. This is why the demons could not be entirely erased. They were too old, too deep. They had been part of winter celebrations for longer than Christianity itself had existed. Every attempt to suppress them only drove them underground, where they waited for opportunities to resurface. In recent decades, Krampus has experienced a revival. Films, books, greeting cards, parades. The Christmas demon has returned to popular culture with a vengeance. People who never heard of him 20 years ago now dress up in Krampus costumes for holiday parties. Why? Perhaps because something in us knows that the darkness belongs, that a holiday without shadow is incomplete, that the sanitized, commercialized, relentlessly cheerful Christmas of the modern era is missing something essential. The demons are coming back because we need them, not to terrorize children. That impulse, thankfully, has faded. but to remind us that winter is dark for a reason, that the longest night exists, that light means nothing without shadow to contrast it. Saint Nicholas and his demons understood this. The modern world is slowly remembering. The journey from Bishop Nicholas of Myra to Santa Claus is a journey across 1,000 years and 1,000 miles. It is a story of cultural transmission, of adaptation, of forgetting and reinvention. After Nicholas died, around 343 AD, according to tradition, his fame only grew. Miracles continued to be attributed to his intercession. His tomb in Myra became a pilgrimage site. Sailors, children, merchants, prisoners, pawnbrokers, all claimed him as their patron. He became one of the most popular saints in both the Eastern and Western churches. In 1087, Italian merchants from the city of Bari stole his bones from Myra, which had fallen under Muslim control, and brought them to their home city. The theft was reframed as a rescue, a liberation of holy relics from infidel hands. The bones still rest in Bari today, in a basilica built specifically to house them. This relocation spread his cult throughout Western Europe. Churches were dedicated to him from Ireland to Greece. His feast day, December 6th, became a major celebration, particularly for children who received gifts in his honor. The connection between Nicholas and gift-giving was already ancient by this point, stretching back to the story of the three sisters and their dowries. It was in the Netherlands that the figure we would recognize began to take shape. The Dutch celebrated Sinterklaas, their name for St. Nicholas, with particular enthusiasm. On December the 5th, the eve of his feast, children would leave their shoes by the fireplace, hoping Sinterklaas would fill them with gifts. They would leave hay and carrots for his horse, a white steed that carried him across the rooftops. Sinterklaas wore the traditional garb of a Catholic bishop, a red robe, a mitre, the tall pointed hat, a staff. He was stern as well as generous. He kept a book recording children's behavior, and he was accompanied by Zwarte Piet, who punished the wicked, while Sinterklaas rewarded the good. This tradition crossed the Atlantic with Dutch colonists. When they settled New Amsterdam, later renamed New York, they brought Sinterklaas with them. And in the cultural melting pot of the New World, he would be transformed once more. The Santa Claus we know today is largely an American creation, and his creation was surprisingly deliberate. In 1809, the writer Washington Irving, author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, published a satirical history of New York that included references to St. Nicholas as the city's patron saint. He described Sinterklaas flying over rooftops in a wagon, smoking a pipe, bringing gifts to children. This was humorous invention as much as historical record, but it planted seeds. In 1823, the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas appeared, the one that begins, "'Twas the night before Christmas." It was published anonymously, but later attributed to Clement Clark Moore. This poem did more than any other single text to define the modern Santa Claus. Moore's Santa is no longer a stern bishop in religious robes. He is a jolly old elf, chubby and plump, with twinkling eyes and rosy cheeks. He smokes a pipe. He drives a sleigh pulled by 8 reindeer, named for the first time in this poem. He slides down chimneys. He fills stockings. He does his work in a single night and then vanishes, laughing into the sky. Gone is the mitre. Gone is the staff. Gone is the book of children's behavior and the companion who punishes the wicked. Moore's Santa is all reward and no punishment, all sweetness and no shadow. He is a fantasy figure designed to delight, not to frighten or to judge. the transformation continued throughout the 19th century. Thomas Nast, the famous political cartoonist, drew Santa repeatedly for Harper's Weekly, gradually standardizing his appearance. The red suit trimmed with white fur, the broad black belt, the round belly, the white beard and jolly expression. By the end of the century, this was Santa, a secular figure of generosity and good cheer, stripped of religious meaning and historical depth alike. The final transformation came in the 20th century, when the Coca-Cola company began using Santa in its advertising. Contrary to popular belief, Coke did not invent Santa's red suit. That had been standard for decades. But their illustrations, painted by Haddon Sundblom beginning in 1931, cemented Santa's modern image with unprecedented reach. Millions of people around the world encountered Sundblom's Santa on Coca-Cola advertisements. Healthy, happy, drinking Coke, spreading Christmas cheer. The saint who slapped heretics. The bishop who rescued children from a butcher's barrel. The stern judge who traveled with demons. All of this was gone, replaced by a brand mascot designed to sell sugar water. The transformation of Nicholas into Santa is not merely a matter of changing costumes and customs. It represents a fundamental shift in how we understand the holidays and how we understand ourselves. Nicholas of Myra was a figure of moral seriousness. He gave gifts, yes, but his gifts were acts of rescue, interventions in desperate situations. He saved girls from prostitution. He raised murdered children from the dead. He stood against heresy, even when it meant striking a man in front of the emperor. He was not nice. He was righteous. Santa Claus is nice. That is his entire job. He is infinitely indulgent, endlessly forgiving. He threatens coal but never delivers it. He keeps a list of naughty and nice, but seems to give presents to everyone regardless. He is a figure of unconditional acceptance, comforting perhaps, but morally empty. The old Nicholas traditions acknowledged darkness. They looked at the reality of human evil, at butchers who murder children, at the sins that lurk in every heart, and they offered a response. The response included judgment. It included punishment. It included the terrifying possibility that you might fail, that you might be found wanting, that the demons might get you after all. But it also included hope. If you could be punished, you could also be redeemed. If the demons were real, so was the saint who commanded them. The stakes were high, but they were real. The moral universe had teeth. Santa Claus offers no stakes. He is pure reward with no risk, pure pleasure with no pain. He asks nothing of children except that they believe in him. And even that requirement has become optional in many households. He is a pleasant fiction that makes children happy, and that seems to be enough. Is it enough? We live in an age that struggles with moral seriousness. We are uncomfortable with judgment. We are suspicious of claims that some behaviors are better than others, that choices have consequences, that the universe might care what we do. We have created a culture of infinite tolerance, and in doing so, we may have lost something important. The old Nicholas traditions were not gentle, they were not comfortable, but they took morality seriously. They believed that good and evil were real, that behavior mattered, that the cosmos itself was invested in human choices. They offered fear, yes, but also meaning. A meaningful universe is a scary universe, but it may also be a more honest one. Santa Claus asks nothing. Nicholas of Myra asked everything. Perhaps that is why we prefer Santa. The bones of St. Nicholas still exist. They rest in the Basilica di San Nicola in Bari, Italy, the same bones that merchants stole from Myra nearly 1,000 years ago. Every year, pilgrims come to venerate them. The crypt beneath the basilica is dimly lit, heavy with incense and the weight of centuries. Orthodox Christians and Catholics both claim Nicholas as their own, and both groups gather here to pray. The bones exude a mysterious liquid, manna, the faithful call it, that has been collected and distributed to pilgrims for centuries. Scientific analysis has confirmed that the bones are consistent with a 4th century Mediterranean male. They show signs of the ailments Nicholas would have suffered from years of imprisonment. They match the historical descriptions of the saint's physical appearance. Whatever else one believes, these appear to be genuinely ancient remains, genuinely connected to the historical figure called Nicholas of Myra. It is strange to think about. Somewhere in a crypt in Italy, the actual skeleton of Santa Claus lies in a marble tomb. The man who became the myth. The bones that walked into the Council of Nicaea, that struck Arius, that knelt in prayer before the butcher's barrel. They are still here, still tangible, still real. But the bones are fragmentary. Not all of Nicholas remains in Bari. In 1087, when the Italian merchants made their raid on Myra, they were in a hurry. They grabbed what they could, but other relic hunters followed. The remaining bones, particularly fragments of the skull, were taken to Venice, where they rest in the church of San Nicolo al Lido. Other fragments are scattered across Europe, claimed by churches in France, Germany, and beyond. The saint has been dismembered, his body distributed across a continent. There is something fitting in this, almost biblical. His remains were spread so that blessings might be spread. His bones became seeds, planted in different soils, growing into different traditions. From a single life came 1,000 stories, 1,000 celebrations, 1,000 variations on the theme. And yet there is also something lost in the scattering. The man was divided to become a symbol. The individual was fragmented to serve collective needs. What Nicholas actually was, what he actually believed, what he actually did, all of this became secondary to what communities wanted him to represent. In a way, the treatment of his bones prefigures the treatment of his legacy. Both were broken apart. Both were distributed. Both were transformed into commodities. Spiritual commodities in one case, commercial in the other, but commodities nonetheless. And yet Nicholas is not only bones and legends. In parts of Europe, the older traditions persist. In Austria and Bavaria, December 5th remains Krampusnacht, Krampus night. Young men in elaborate hand-carved Krampus masks run through the streets, rattling chains, chasing spectators, bringing controlled chaos to the winter dark. Saint Nicholas follows, stately in his bishop's robes, offering blessings and treats to those who have earned them. In the Netherlands, Santa Claus still arrives by steamboat from Spain each November, launching weeks of celebration that climax on December 5th. Families gather for gift-giving and traditional foods. Poems are written and recited. The old customs continue, adapted but not abandoned. In Orthodox Christian countries, Nicholas remains a saint, venerated, prayed to, honored with icons and candles and liturgies. His feast day is a religious observance, not a commercial opportunity. His image appears not in shopping malls, but in churches, not selling products, but sanctifying worship. These traditions remind us that the Nicholas story is not finished. The saint has not been entirely consumed by the commercial machinery that turned him into Santa. He persists in pockets and corners, in communities that remember the older ways, in people who find meaning in practices their ancestors would recognize. And there is something remarkable about this persistence. 1700 years since his death, Nicholas still commands attention, still inspires devotion, still provides a framework for celebration and meaning-making. How many people from the 4th century can claim as much? The man who slapped Arius, the man who saved the 3 sisters, the man who raised children from the butcher's barrel. He is still here, in some form, still shaping how millions of people around the world experience the darkest time of year. That is not nothing. That is, in its way, miraculous. Every December, something strange happens. Billions of people around the world participate in rituals they do not fully understand. They hang stockings by fireplaces, a custom born from a saint's secret midnight charity. They set out milk and cookies, an echo of offerings left for supernatural visitors. They tell their children about a magical being who travels the world in a single night, rewarding the good and threatening the wicked. Most do not know where these customs come from. Most have never heard of Nicholas of Myra, or the Council of Nicaea, or the butcher's barrel, or the demons who once walked with the gift giver through the winter dark. The symbols persist, but the meanings have drifted away. This is how traditions die, not through abolition, but through forgetting. Not through rejection, but through transformation so complete that the original becomes unrecognizable. Santa Claus is Saint Nicholas with his memory erased. The shadow of a saint wearing the saint's red robes, going through the saint's motions, but emptied of the saint's substance. And yet, the shadow persists. The rituals continue. Something in us still responds to the idea of a gift giver in the winter night, a figure who sees us, who judges us, who responds to our behavior with blessing or with warning. Something in us needs that story, even when we have forgotten why. Perhaps it is the darkness itself that calls it forth. December is the dying of the year, the triumph of night over day, the cold that kills. Our ancestors knew this darkness intimately, in a way we have largely forgotten. For them, winter was a genuine threat to food stores, to health, to life itself. The celebration of the solstice, in all its forms, was a defiance of that darkness, a proclamation that even in the longest night there is light, that even in death there is life, that even when the world seems to be ending, something holy persists. Nicholas understood this. His entire ministry was about bringing light to dark places, giving dowries to girls who would otherwise have been sold, raising children from barrels of death, standing against heresy when everyone else was silent. He was not a comfortable figure. He was not nice, but he was present. Present in the darkness, working against it, offering hope where hope seemed impossible. We have traded that figure for Santa Claus, a kinder figure certainly, a gentler one that does not frighten children or demand moral transformation, one that asks nothing and gives freely, a pure fantasy of unconditional acceptance. But fantasies are fragile things. They work only as long as we agree to pretend together. The moment a child stops believing in Santa, and all children eventually do, the magic evaporates. There is nothing left to hold on to, no deeper truth beneath the pleasant fiction. Nicholas offered something different. Not a pleasant fiction, but a difficult truth. The truth that the world is dark and dangerous, that evil is real, that we are capable of terrible things, and also that goodness is possible, that courage matters, that one person standing against darkness can make a difference. That is not a story for children alone. That is a story for adults too, perhaps especially for adults who have seen enough of the world to know how dark it can get. The real Saint Nicholas was not a jolly old elf. He was a fighter, a survivor of persecution, a man who gave away everything he had to help those in desperate need. A bishop who would rather face imprisonment than let heresy go unanswered. A saint who looked into the butcher's barrel and saw not death, but an opportunity for resurrection. He had demons too, not inside him, around him. Companions who embodied the darkness he fought against, who reminded the faithful that evil is real and punishment is possible. The shadow that made his light meaningful. We have forgotten the demons. We have forgotten the darkness. We have turned the winter solstice into a shopping holiday and the saint into a mascot. But the darkness is still there. It does not care whether we acknowledge it. The longest night still comes. The cold still kills. The evils Nicholas fought against, the exploitation of the vulnerable, the murder of the innocent, the heresies that twist faith into something unrecognizable, these have not vanished. They have only changed their forms. Perhaps that is why Krampus is returning. Perhaps that is why people are rediscovering the older traditions, not because they want to frighten children, but because they recognize that something has been lost, that a celebration without shadow is shallow, that a holiday without moral weight is merely entertainment. Nicholas slapped a heretic. Nicholas saved children from a butcher. Nicholas stood against the darkness of his age, and the darkness did not overcome him. That is the saint we need, not the one we have made. Remember Nicholas of Myra. Remember the demons who walked with him. Remember the darkness they were fighting against, and the light they were fighting for. Remember that the night is long, but it is not forever. Remember that the bones of the saint still lie in their crypt in Bari, patient and silent, waiting for those who remember what he actually was. And remember this: every time you hang a stocking, every time you speak of a gift giver in the night, every time you participate in the rituals of December, you are touching something ancient, something that reaches back 17 centuries through transformations and forgetting to a man in a bishop's robe who believed that darkness could be defeated. You are standing in the shadow of Saint Nicholas. What you do with that shadow is up to you. If this story moved you, if you believe these dark chapters deserve to be remembered, please subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It is always a privilege to know who joins us in these explorations of the shadows. Until next time, this has been the Midnight Archives. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never forget, the past is never truly past. It lives in the stories we tell, in the saints we forget, and in the demons we pretend don't exist.